collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, to hell with culture.
Because you see it today that money can create artists of repute where there is really no value at all in their artwork.
Is Cyprus coastline up for sale?
I should say that this is exactly what officially the Greek government is doing in order to face the financial crisis. They want to sell part of the coastline to individuals. So I would not be surprised if our government tries to do something similar here, because owning the coastline is big bucks to a lot of business people.
And ambiguous statements on Cyprus from Turkey's new president.
He did refer very clearly to two states, but then he referred to political equality. So was he referring to two independent states which would cohabit on the island of Cyprus and be both sovereign equal entities on the international stage, or was he referring to the existence of two states within a bizonal bicommunal federation, which obviously outlined in 77, 79 high-level agreements, various UN resolutions which are followed?
Ben Read is the son of leading international art critic Herbert Read, and he's in Cyprus for the international premiere of the film To Hell with Culture. It's all happening at the University of Nicosia Cine Studio on Friday, September 12th at 7:30. If you can't make that date and you're in the Paphos district, then pencil in Balli Elektriki at 7 p.m. on Saturday. He joins us on the Cyprus News Digest. Ben, first of all, a little bit about the film, To Hell with Culture. Extraordinary title, really.
Yes, it is a strange title, but it was the title of one of my father's books of essays. And he actually got the quote, To Hell with Culture, from Eric Gill, who was the outstanding British sculptor, but who is also a brilliant writer. I mean, if you read his things, they are so fluent. And Gill had said, to hell with culture, like a sauce you add to stale fish or something like that. And the book was very much about avoiding the imposition of cultural values on everybody, and much more about making culture a natural issue arising from education and a sort of natural attraction to cultural values.
Has that changed? I mean, the book was written in 1943, and the world has changed so much since then in terms of the movement of populations, the sharing of cultures. Is it still valid?
I think it is, because it's a principle, and I know that in Britain today particularly, there are huge government apparatuses trying to create culture for everybody, which never works. I'm always much more impressed, because I used to deal with art students at university, the way, they may try and get into the system, but then suddenly you notice, this was in Leeds, sort of little groups of ex-students get together and set up their own communal studios and things like that, and gradually the message gets out. It's this natural development which I think my father was calling for, rather than this artificial government institutional imposition.
He said, I think, that civilization should be based on cooperation, in which art would not be seen as a commercial commodity. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because artists need to make a living, don't they? So how can it not be, in a sense, a commercial commodity?
He developed into an anarchist philosopher, and he stuck very much to the ideals of anarchism, that somehow, even if you have small communities which are creating the art, there will still be some natural system. I mean, it's not as simple as, you trade a chicken for a picture, or something like that. But you try and avoid the capitalist system. I'm not sure that it ever has developed far enough to show that it works, but I do know that the basic opposition to the imposition of capital, because you see it today, that money can create artists of repute where there is really no value at all in their artwork.
That's quite a thing to say. I mean, if you're looking at art in those terms, and you've worked in the field of art, I think, all your life, how has it affected your approach to culture and the arts?
I've always been very grateful, if you like, to commercial galleries for showing things. It gives you the opportunity to see the work, and you have to cope with that somehow. But I've recently been working on a joint history of the Royal Academy in London, and it's supposed to be based on archive, officially controlled and things like that. But when you get to the living artists, there is no archive in the Academy, except for the living artists. And then that gives you the opportunity to go to them, and you talk to them, and if you talk to them reasonably and sympathetically, you get a completely different story. Of course, they're all established by now, but it's the story of how they realise this, if you like, in spite of the capital.
And it does seem that basically you're saying that art, just like anything else in the world, can be valued purely on the basis of whether somebody invests in it. So the people with money can actually create value in the things that they have, even if it's worthless.
Yes, I don't think that's the only way art can be valued, but it is, in the societies we live in, a very important way. On the other hand, I was mentioning these, if you like, collectors of artists. If you keep your eye open for them and use your own judgment, just go and see what they're doing, and you can judge for yourself then what the alternatives are. I once gave a talk at the time of the Sensation show, which was on in London at the Academy, the Saatchi collection, and I was giving a talk in the University Gallery in Leeds on the drawings of Alan Davey, and the audience, were the local art people, and all they were saying is, "Oh God, has art come to this about the Sensation show?" And I said, "For goodness sake, Alan Davey is still alive, doing these fabulous drawings. I know of places that don't get in the news." I mean, I actually meant Scarborough College, where there are real artists teaching. There were only about 3 or 4 of them, and the students were producing, real paintings. You could smell the oil paint, you could see the pots that were being made. So I was trying to deflect their attention from sensation and just to realise that there are things going on they don't know about.
All right, we must come back to the film, To Hell with Culture, as we said earlier, showing Friday and Saturday. How does it portray the ideas in the book? I mean, it's such a different medium, isn't it? You can read something and interpret it. How does Hugh Wall interpret To Hell with Culture in his film?
I think he uses it essentially as a catchphrase. The film, the fact in our family we were all, we didn't quite know what it was going to be like. But Hugh is a creative filmmaker, not a documentary filmmaker. And he manages to get in elements of my father's life and beliefs which lay behind To Hell with Culture. He said this thing about, because he was a farmer's son, he's always said that he always sympathises with people on the land. That's the background he comes from, which, if you like, detached him from the artificial cultures which he met with later in his life. There is also a very strong anarchist element from some of the speakers, particularly there's a group of, some of them are now elderly Canadian anarchists who've sort of read Herbert Read, and although there was some debate about whether he got it all right, they were wonderful. As they said, these are the real values. And there was one figure you filmed he's a jobbing anarchist printer. And he got it absolutely right. It doesn't matter about having a title or something like that. It's what you say and what you believe in that inspired him.
And that'll all come out, of course, in the film, as I say, Friday in Nicosia, Saturday in Paphos. Ben Read, a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
We've spoken on the programme before about the erosion of our coastline, and I don't mean the natural erosion, I'm talking about man-made erosion. There are illegalities up and down the coast of Cyprus, and not a great deal seems to be being done about them. Now, our former Environment Commissioner, Bambos Theobemptou, is somebody who's been trying to protect the coastline for many years. Bambos, thanks for joining us on the Cyprus News Digest. This is worrying, not only because of what's gone before, but I've heard that there is a proposal that the law will be changed and enable people who buy coastal property to actually own the beach and the sea. Is that true?
Yes, there is a proposal that is circulating around that will actually make proposals that, if you ask me, against the Barcelona Convention that we signed for the protection of coastal areas and the way that we should manage coastal areas. And I'm not sure how we're going to transpose the directive of the European Union. It will have clashes with the directive on the special marine planning. But definitely with the integrated coastal zone management system, it will have clashes, and I see us going straight to court if we pass these proposals that are circulating around on the management of the coastal zone.
They're not circulating very widely, however, are they? My understanding is that some of our MPs on the relevant committees in Parliament don't actually know what these proposals are. Yes,
it's a proposal that was... If you look at the document, it's exactly the document that is prepared in a way that is delivered in parliamentary committees. But I know MPs don't know about this. I don't know where this originated from, but it might even be simply so that they get an official response from people. But in any case, just to be sure, there is a petition going around. People can sign against this. I should say that this is exactly what officially the Greek government is doing in order to face the financial crisis. They want to sell part of the coastline to individuals. So I will not be surprised if our government tries to do something similar here, because owning the coastline is big bucks to a lot of business people.
To do what with?
Once you have the beach on your own, you can develop hotels with a private beach. You can do certain construction works on the beach. You can have your own private beach, which is not allowed by the current law. The current law, and this will surprise people living in Cyprus that know how the system is, defines the beach as 100 yards from the beach, from the place where the water breaks. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about that definition of the beach. The integrated coastal zone management, the system that Barcelona Convention defines, says that the coastal area is as far as the land that the sea affects environmentally, and as far in the water as the coast affects the sea. So you need to do a study to define the coastal area. It's not something that you say so much distance from the water is coast. It depends on the area. And just to explain what I'm saying, for instance, if you go to a river estuary, definitely the river affects the sea quite a distance into the water, and definitely the sea affects the estuary quite a distance into land. If you go to places where you have sand or vegetation that is related to the sea, it might be even more than 100 yards. So what you need to do is you need to survey all the coast and mark the areas that will be protected, and it will fall in the integrated coastal zone management system.
I suppose it's a silly question to ask whether Cyprus has mapped that, has it?
Not only that, we haven't done that. We haven't even looked at the conditions that are set out by the ICZM. And I fear that soon we will get a letter from the European Commission. This is something that it will turn the tables upside down in Cyprus in the way that we manage the coast. Just to let you know, for instance, it says that whatever you do on the coast, you need to have definitely an environmental impact assessment.
We tend to do those after we've done the work, don't we?
We don't do them. We don't even do this. And after that, you need to have a public consultation before you do anything on the coast. So if you contrast that with what the law now is, and the law says that the district governor, the eparchos, in Cyprus defines whatever happens on the beach. And if you have a municipality, it's the responsibility of the municipality. That's why you see in all the municipalities that are coastal municipalities and the villages, you see all these things cropping up on the beach. Because they give them permit, or they allow them, they close their eyes and they allow these things to happen without actually implementing the law.
Is there anything that can be done retrospectively?
There are quite a few people that are thinking to send a letter to the European Commission to mention that we are lagging behind in implementing this. We need to do something definitely, because if they ignore the ICZM and they go for the type of proposals that they have now in Parliament, it will make matters even worse. So we need to act quickly and preemptively.
It sounds to me if there is this piece of paper that's going to go before Parliament, giving, I think, the Interior Minister of the day the absolute permission as to whether or not, say, you go to him saying, I want to build this hotel here, and he says, yes, that's absolutely fine, and signs the bit of paper that gives you the beach and the sea. If they're going to even consider doing that, surely it goes against all the EU management systems that you've just been talking about, or have we not got those in place yet?
We don't have them in place. There is a big argument on how to implement it, and they decided not to do anything.
So we're waiting basically to do this thing first before we look at those.
Yes, it's very weird. Whenever you look at these things, there is a smell of some kind of intervention by business people. Somebody wants to do something, or a lot of people, a lot of business people want to do a lot of things on the beach, and I'm sure they use the economic crisis as an excuse, because under these conditions, the government will come up and say, I know this is not very good, but, we have a crisis, we need to allow this type of development. So there are a number of excuses, and we are very good at finding excuses in Cyprus. I'm sure they will try and push this. So we need to be vigilant with that, and that's why there are groups on the Facebook pages and everywhere, and petitions going around in order to try and stop this early.
Okay, and people should look on Facebook for what, do you know?
There is Protect Our Coasts, and there are two groups. One is Protect Our Coasts, and the other one is Προστατεύουμε τις παραλίες μας. So one or the other, I think people should be able to find this.
And they both have links, I'm sure, to this petition that is
going definitely. The petition is floating around in Facebook, so it should be easy to find.
Save our seas, it seems to be coming back to haunt us. Bambos, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
If you were with us on last week's Cyprus News Digest, you'll have heard us talking to James Kerr-Lindsay. He's a senior research fellow at the London School of Economics and an expert on Turkey and Cyprus. Well, we did concentrate last week on Erdogan's election as president of Turkey and the impact that might have on the country's EU aspirations. But Erdogan visited Cyprus very soon after he was elected. He was met not entirely with open arms. There were demonstrations in the occupied areas at the same time as there was a peace initiative with both Greek and Turkish Cypriots joining hands across the divide in Nicosia, followed by a bicommunal concert. What does the election of Tayyip Erdogan to the presidency of Turkey hold in store for the possibility of a solution to the Cyprus problem? James Kerr-Lindsay joins us yet again. James, what do you make of it? Because he talked really quite tough in the speech that he made while he was in Nicosia, saying that Turkey would not accept anything except two states, and I found that extraordinary. Did he mean two states separately or two states as part of a federation? Because that really is the bottom line here, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think this is where it was a very confusing statement, because it could be read in two very different ways. He did refer very clearly to two states, but then he referred to political equality. So was he referring to two independent states which would cohabit on the island of Cyprus and be both sovereign equal entities on the international stage, or was he referring to the existence of two states within a bizonal bicommunal federation, which obviously outlined in 77, 79 high-level agreements, various UN resolutions which have followed, and is the model that has been accepted by the international community and indeed by the two Cypriot communities over the years. And so I think it was very difficult to know exactly what he meant there, and maybe there was that sort of calculated ambiguity in what he was saying, that it could be read different ways by different audiences, and so
which is not very helpful at the moment when the negotiations seem to be stalled. If you look back at his past form on the Cyprus issue, what would you say that is? Is he for or against a solution?
Well, I mean, we've had him as a major player on the Turkish political scene now for 12 years, and I think a lot of people who've been following this for a long time will remember that what was remarkable about the night that AKP won the election in November 2002 was that when Erdogan went on television that evening, he said that the strategic priority for Turkey is to get into the European Union. In order to do that, relations with Greece must be improved and there must be a Cyprus solution.
That's 12 years ago.
And that's 12 years ago. And but the question is, and looking back on it, was his intention to join the European Union sincere? Did he really want to join the European Union, or was this about trying to create the conditions within Turkey for him to increase his power? Remembering, Turkey 12 years ago is a very different country to the Turkey that we see today. The military was a very, very serious player in Turkish politics then. You had a new government which was Islamic-leaning, which was something which absolutely the military stood against, and he knew that the only way he could reduce the power of the military in Turkey was to take Turkey along the EU accession path. But there was always very, very serious questions in people's mind. Was he serious about joining the European Union, or was he simply using EU accession as a way of bringing about domestic reforms?
Well, he's certainly managed to, I'm not sure, emasculate is perhaps a bit of a strong word, but the military no longer holds the sway that it used to in Turkey.
It's incredible. Nobody, I remember, I was just thinking about this, a couple of weeks ago, was that there was a time in Turkey when everyone, would be glued to the newspapers in August for the latest round of military promotions, because it was almost like Kremlinology. You were looking to see who was being, promoted up to the lead, commander of the First Army, because you could work out from their age and who was ahead of them, who would be the chief of the general staff, maybe 6 or 7, 8 years down the road, and that was such an important position. And we don't have any of that now. These aren't the names that they were once, the Turkish military. But all of this sort of comes back to this question of Erdogan knew that there was no getting Turkey into the European Union without a Cyprus solution. And there was no real process of Europeanization in Turkey, no credible process of Europeanization in Turkey, unless Cyprus was solved.
And bearing in mind the way he clamped down on the demonstrations, the fact that seemingly at will social media is switched off across Turkey for anybody who doesn't know how to use an onion online, what does that say about his sincerity, do you think, in trying to solve the Cyprus problem?
Well, again,
because we do say here that Turkey is the key. Do you think that's still the case?
it's certainly important. I mean, I've never felt comfortable about the idea of reducing the role of Turkish Cypriots in all of this. I've heard it said so many times over the years, it's about Turkey. We should just be dealing with Turkey. No, you can't just deal with Turkey. You know, Turkish Cypriots, you know, are actors in all of this. There's good political reasons why that should be the case, but there's also good moral reasons why, you know, that they deserve to have their voice heard. So I think it's always important to stress that it's never been quite as straightforward as just simply saying dealing with Turkey, and if Turkey wants a solution, there will be a solution.
But Turkey does have great influence on the Turkish Cypriots as
yes.
well. And earlier in the year, we had some messages coming from Davutoglu that were interpreted here as meaning that they were leaning on the Turkish Cypriots because Erdogan is seen as being a little bit on the hardline side, and there was a little bit of hope that maybe this meant there would be a bit more flexibility from the Turkish Cypriots, and that hasn't materialised.
Well, I think, you know, that's important because it rather reinforces that message that it's not just about Turkey wanting a solution and being able to deliver a solution. The fact that Turkey had to put pressure on the Turkish Cypriots actually shows that for all sorts of reasons, it is a lot more complicated than just simply saying, you know, the solution lies in Ankara. Yes, Ankara is a major player in this. But
the Turkish Cypriots won't jump either way without at least a nod from Ankara, will they?
Well,
there
I mean,
are still
you know,
a lot of Turkish troops in the north of Ireland.
And security is important, and they will be looking, certainly. You know, there's no doubt about it. And, you know, we are, again, in a rather different era. I think, you know, for those of us who sort of are like counterfactuals and the thought, I mean, wouldn't it be interesting to know where we would stand now if Denktash was still around in the north? And Erdogan was still pressing for a solution, or how Denktash might feel about the increasing role that the AKP plays in the north. I mean, this is something that, you know, in speaking with many Turkish Cypriots, they feel very concerned about. I know that Greek Cypriots have spoken for many years about their concerns about the Turkification of the north, the way that, you know, the Turkish Cypriot identity has been lost and that it's becoming very, very Turkish. And, you know, many Turkish Cypriots have
Many have left, haven't they?
A lot have left, and some have shared the concerns. But, you know, many have often said, look, you know, this is overstated by Greek Cypriots. But one thing that I have heard over recent years is this sort of, it's a little bit of a clumsy expression, but the AKPization of the north, the way that, you know, the AKP is now exerting influence over the political life in the north. And that's something that does seem to worry people. And is all part and parcel of this. And this, you know, could very well be tied in with the protests that we saw when Erdogan came to the island. But I think it's also significant to note that it does seem to be a tradition that new Turkish presidents will visit northern Cyprus as their first foreign trip. That in itself says a lot about how important Cyprus remains in the Turkish psyche.
What do you make of the letter that President Anastasiades supposedly has sent to Mr. Erdogan, and that the Greek emissary, I think it was the foreign minister, says he delivered, and then we have Erdogan saying, well, I haven't had a letter. Is this just all diplomatic games? Where in all of this do you see the Greek Cypriot negotiator, Andreas Mavroyiannis, and indeed whatever it is that President Anastasiades has in mind? Because bearing in mind what he's got to get through the parties here on the foreclosures bill and the other things that are to do with the Troika and the economy, presumably he's a bit over a barrel if they want to be difficult about the Cyprus problem.
Well, I think on the question of the letter, I mean, it's quite clear that Nicosia wants to have closer engagement with Ankara. It always has. And this is why the visit by the two negotiators to Athens and Ankara was so very important, because there is this sense that the Greek Cypriots need to be able to speak directly with Turkey. But it can't be done over the heads of the Turkish Cypriots, so there had to be a sort of a symmetry to it, hence the visit to Athens, and for the Turkish Cypriot chief negotiator Kudret Ozasai to be able to meet with senior officials in Greece. And I think that was a very, very positive development in a number of ways.
But it doesn't seem to have had any long-term impact on anything. We all said at the time, well, this is a step forward, and suddenly we haven't moved forward at all.
Well, I think for the reasons that you identified, which is quite clearly, there are other problems that Cyprus is dealing with at the moment. And I think, this is one of the things that many people feel is very unfortunate about the moment that President Anastasiades came to power, that he was suddenly confronted with a very, very severe financial crisis, which, the fallout is still being felt now quite clearly. We can see in all sorts of ways that Cyprus is making headway in its recovery, but there are still a lot of painful measures that have got to be passed, which are going to require the support of parties within the parliament who, as we know, have rather hardline views on the Cyprus problem. And so a decision has got to be made. Do you buy their support on economic issues, or do you buy their support on solution to the Cyprus problem? Well, I think, it's very clear that to ordinary Cypriots, who are feeling the pain of the economic crisis, that, that's the first thing that's got to be dealt with at the moment. That said,
do you think that President Anastasiades still he has been on record as saying that he made a mistake pushing the yes vote back on the Annan plan? Has he changed his mind? Are we actually now just sort of, if you like, pussyfooting around the Cyprus problem, which it seems to me our politicians on both sides have been doing now for 40 years?
I think this is one of those concerns that a lot of us who've spent many years watching Cyprus now really, we see the way that things are going. I mean, there was a lot of optimism earlier this year with the joint communique that the talks were going to restart, that maybe the worst and most immediate effects of the financial crisis were over, so maybe it was time that President Anastasiades was going to focus on the Cyprus issue. And frankly speaking, there has been very little progress, and in actual fact, in my time here, I've been struck. Obviously, I follow Cyprus very closely at a distance, but being back on the island and listening to people, there is a despair that we're back to where we've always been. That deadlock that's existed for 40, 50 years, depending on where you see the start of the Cyprus problem.
Is there going to be a solution, do you think, ever?
Well, if I might do a very, very blatant plug for my next book, I've actually, this is one of the things which a couple of years I started thinking about very seriously, and I've asked 30 people who I know from academia and policy observers and opinion formers to put down on paper, answering in essay form, that question, can Cyprus be solved? Because I think this is a question that a lot of us are asking. We are asking ourselves. It has been so long now. What is it that seems to stand in the way? Is it the process? Is it the nature of the settlement that's been agreed? Do we have to just rip up all the agreements and say, let's start from scratch, let's rethink? Or is there something, that can be done to alter the way that the UN handles this? Because I think it's very, very clear to anyone who's watching Cyprus that something's got to change. This has been going on, and perhaps, we are now too constrained. That maybe there does need to be some fresh thinking on how to tackle the Cyprus problem. We've got so many UN Security Council resolutions which sort of set the parameters. Are they too narrow? Or is it about something else? Is it about sort of trying to find a type of solution within the context of a bizonal, bicommunal federation, which is more in tune with the attitudes of the two communities about living together? A lot of people don't like a bizonal, bicommunal federation because they say it's some form of apartheid. But on the other hand, what is the reality of the two communities wanting to live together and really engaging with each other on a day-to-day basis? So
what conclusion does your book come to, and when's it out?
Well, the thing is, you can imagine, when you ask 30 different people to come up with their views, there isn't a consensus on this. And I was actually very, very clear with everyone. People would say to me, what do you want me, to write about? Well, no, it's not what I want you to write about. The way I framed it is I said, look, imagine one morning you're in New York, you get into the lift and the Secretary General gets in and you're going up to his offices and you've got 10 minutes to make a pitch. It's the play on the elevator pitch, for business plans. What do you say if you have a venture capital? What would you say to the UN Secretary General if you had just 10 minutes with him, say, look, this is what you need to focus on, the one, maybe two things that you think are absolute sort of keys to this, and just let people go with it. So there's a whole range of views. Some write on the role of natural gas, which obviously is a very topical issue. Others want to talk about security. Some talk about the nature of a settlement, federal models. Some look back into history and say, we've got to move beyond history, but how do we do that? The role of education. So it's a very, very diverse range of views. And I think that was one of the most interesting aspects of working on this, is that you realise, there are so many parts to the Cyprus problem that make it very, very tricky. And it's not just about the blueprint itself. Over the years, there's been so many sayings that have come out about Cyprus, one for almost every occasion. I think this is the one where you pull out the one which is, it's not the complexity of it all, it's the infinity of it all. I think that really, to my mind, captures it. Funnily enough, Cyprus isn't nuts and bolts of a solution, and not nearly as complicated as people often imagine. We know what a solution is going to look like. Hardliners might not like it, but I think we're all fairly clear on it.
But you've got to get the people to accept it.
You've got to get the people to accept it. You've also got to deal with a political class which I don't think is always willing and able to level with people.
Okay, and the book's out when?
Hopefully September, so hopefully
and it's
this
called?
month. Resolving Cyprus, and it's with IB Taurus.
That is James Kerr-Lindsay, Senior Research Fellow at the London School of Economics. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.